Okay. All right. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining the social panel. We're so excited to have you join us this morning. Hopefully you enjoyed the keynote speaker. And now we are going to talk a little bit about breaking down barriers as a result of COVID and thereafter, those that still exist and those that occurred as a result or were revealed during the time of the pandemic. And let me start by introducing myself. I am the moderator. My name is Carla Mahalik. I am a professor of political science at SUNY Broome Community College. And I've been asked to participate in this conference, and it's been an honor to work with those at Binghamton University and the conference coordinators. And it's also been my honor to work with the panelists that are joining us today. And their names are, in no particular order, Jordan Ramsey, a student at SUNY Broome and the Newman Campus Compact Award winner. Gay Cano, in charge of ETM's Solar Works and also a League of Women Voters member, and that's how I know her. Mary Whitaker, social worker and also former coordinator of our drug and alcohol program at SUNY Broome, and finally the vice president of student affairs at SUNY Broome. So all of these people have important things to discuss regarding the barriers that occurred during COVID. And so I am going to start with Gay Cano. She'll introduce herself a little bit and then share her statement with you. And each panelist will share 3 to 4 minute statements, and these statements will set the table for our conversation this morning. And if you have questions, please put those questions in the chat, and we will get to your questions once everyone's had a chance to share their viewpoint on our topic. Gay.
Okay, well, good morning. My name is Gay Cano, rhymes with tough, and I am the president of ETM Solar Works, which does design and installation of solar energy systems. This is our 34th year in business, so we have had to overcome a lot of barriers, and I'm going to do a quick rundown on a little bit. I'm not going to give you the solar presentation, but just sort of what we're about and a little bit about climate change, because for us that's the fight that we are fighting. In 2021, the cost of utility scale solar dropped down to 4 cents per kilowatt hour, even with no subsidies. That made solar electricity the lowest cost electricity in history. At the time, electricity from coal-fired power plants was about 6 cents. It makes sense that solar power could get to this stage because it's a source requiring no fuel. There's no fuel costs, and once it's built, so the fuel is free, really hard to compete with that. The cost to build a solar power plant is now about $1 a watt. Just as a comparison, the cost to build a nuclear power plant is about $7 a watt. And of course, nuclear has ongoing fuel costs and disposal costs. The buzz today, though, is that we must make a transition away from burning things as fast as possible to avoid catastrophic rise in Earth's temperature, sea levels, and storms. For decades, climate scientists have been talking about this problem, changing the climate, that we are changing the climate due to increased CO2. Things that are happening today with the climate are actually worse than their worst case scenarios. So worse already. We're currently at 416 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. To put this in perspective, the CO2 prior to the Industrial Revolution was 280. And the difference between the previous ice age and that number is 100 parts per million. So the difference between 416 and 280 is 136. Ding, 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 ding. Why do we think this isn't going to be a problem, right? We have all of this happening. We have a ton of data about it. Luckily, we have all the technology we need to make a transition. So we have barriers, but we also have the technology to do it. The solar resource is huge. The amount of solar energy falling on the land area of Earth is 1,400 times more than the energy consumption of our entire civilization. And the yearly amount of solar energy falling on just the land area is 100 times larger than the forever fossil fuel supply. The vast majority of solar cells are made of silicon, which is the second most common element on Earth. And the area of solar cells it takes to power the planet is about 1/10 of 1% of the land area of Earth. Solar cells are cheap as dirt because, you know, they're made of dirt, sand being silicon dioxide. But there's some other factors that are being recognized now that make this transition even easier than we thought. First of all, solar power is so cheap now that we can overbuild. We can build more than we need to serve the immediate load and have excess to use to set up energy storage for when there's no sun. And by the way, the cost of energy storage has also fallen dramatically. Next, it takes very little time to build out our solar capacity. So you will hear people talking about, oh yeah, we need to go to renewable energy, but we can't get there in time. It takes too long. From a technology perspective, I mean, right now the industry is growing at about 40% per year. Plug that into your spreadsheet, and what you find is that in less than 15 years, we can be 100% solar powered in the US of A. In less than 15 years. So that is about the time it takes to permit and build a single nuclear power plant at this point. So there's no problem there. And finally, don't forget about wind energy. So some of the barriers that we're still facing and we still have to pay attention to is that we have to update and upgrade our electricity grid. There's lots to do on this, and it's starting to happen in New York State. I'm not sure what's happening in the rest of the country in this respect, but that's happening. But it's a big job. We have to develop safer and better energy storage, and that is also starting to happen now. We have to stay on that, and we have to recycle batteries and solar cells. And then finally, it's still a good idea to subsidize smaller solar energy systems like on your house roof, because this makes the grid more robust. You know, our grid is pretty vulnerable. I think it's vulnerable to storms, it's vulnerable to attacks. The more distributed generation you have, the less vulnerable it is and the more robust it is. So that's still a good idea. So there's some of the sort of the ups and downs that we're dealing with, and I will leave it right there for now.
Thank you, Gay. All right, we will come back around to talking more about that as we progress. Mary, how about, oh, that was my timer, sorry. Mary, would you please take it from there and share with us some of your thoughts? You got your mute?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Oh, see, sorry. Anyway, my name's Mary Whitaker, and I am a clinical social worker and have been working in the Broome County community for a lot of years. Most recently, I've been a faculty member at SUNY Broome, coordinating the chemical dependency counseling program. And I was really honored to be asked here because COVID kind of changed everything for everybody. Mental health in particular, because mental health and substance abuse is really where my interest is. And I was I think all of us got kind of put into this very stressful mode of having to change the way we do business. And COVID itself caused all these stressors of, loss, grief. I don't know anyone who wasn't impacted by someone's, illness or death during COVID. Not to mention the isolation of being, sent home and the lack of human contact. So, it was clear that mental health was suffering, and quickly. And this sounds a little strange, probably coming, but part of the excitement of being in this, Dare to Dream program was New York State's response to it. Early on, Governor Cuomo, who's probably not known for being the most warm and fuzzy guy, went on to talk about the mental health of New Yorkers and how concerned he was. And that was early, right up in March. So while we're all scrambling to try to, keep caring for others as providers, as teachers, as, whatever we were, Governor Cuomo acknowledged it. So in March, he said, we need volunteers, we need mental health providers, we need, to take care of New Yorkers. At that point, 40,000 people, 40,000 providers stepped up as volunteers to help meet that need. Now, that sounds really great, doesn't it? It did to me. Except, so where there's wonderful things happening, there's also, at the same time, the government was giving incentives and bonuses to travel nurses, paying them tons of money. And so if we really care about mental health, we're not putting our money where our mouths are, basically. We've got providers who really care from a genuine place and concern who came to volunteer, but we really didn't put forth the resources. So of course, my assumption was providers are going to be burning out, right? So I started asking around, and this conference is really what kind of motivated that. What surprised me was it wasn't so much burnout on the providers as frustration. They were energized. When we're talking about resiliency and protective, it feels good to be able to do something, right? All of us want to be able to jump in and be part of the rescue, part of the solution. But the most vulnerable people in our system were falling to the wayside. Overdoses increased. I mean, we had been having a steady decline. Drug overdose deaths were increasing actually to pre-intervention levels. And even as of August of this year, we're at a higher rate than we were even at the beginning of the pandemic for death. So I guess my point to all this is that, while it's nice and it was wonderful to be acknowledged, and the state government is trying, organizations weren't given more money to help with this during the pandemic. So people did what they could. Employers, said, oh, you don't have to use your vacation, but you have to work, when families are available, because the kids are awake. So if somebody needed help, you have to wait till the kids are in bed, right? You don't want to go to counseling with a 3-year-old. And so again, providers stepped up. Organizations did their best to help protect and take care of their folks, but we didn't really put our money where we said we valued. And so for that, I guess I see some opportunity here that if we can keep that advocacy, because it is in, perspective right now, that we recognize everybody's been impacted by this, that somehow we need to make it so we are taking care of everyone, including our providers, as well as each other. So that's pretty much my shtick for the day.
Okay, thank you so much, Mary. Dr. Ross, you're up.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I serve as the Vice President for Student Development and Chief Diversity Officer at SUNY Broome. I have been here for 5.5 years now. I moved here from Kuwait, having lived overseas for 13 years. My role in working with students and in our community is to ensure that our students are engaged outside of the classroom and to support their in-classroom learning. And with the community college being an open door institution, which also means we're everything to everybody, we try to meet you where you are. And for the most part, anecdotally, community colleges serve a large population of students of color, marginalized populations, and I can't do anything about my scratchy speakers. I'm really sorry.
Carol, you didn't sound like that earlier. Do you want to log off, rejoin, and I'll have Jordan talk instead, and then we'll try.
Let's do that. I
Okay.
don't know what happened. These are
I
new
don't know
speakers,
either.
too. These are
Okay,
new
thanks. All
speakers.
right, we'll put Jordan on the spot. Jordan, how about you chat? And then we'll get
All right.
Carol to fill in, when she comes back in. After you're done, then Carol will go and hopefully her sound will sound a little better.
Sounds good. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly and I don't have a Darth Vader voice, so just let me know. Anyway, my name is Jordan Ramsey, kind of like the chef Gordon Ramsay. I just wanted to throw that out there because a lot of people think that. Unrelated, but I am currently a liberal arts student at SUNY Broome Community College. I also serve as the Vice President of Administrative Affairs on Student Assembly. And as Professor Mahalik mentioned, I'm SUNY Broome's this year's cohort for the Newman Civic Fellowship, which is an organization that hosts conferences with leadership workshops, networking opportunities, and basically just educational workshops on civic engagement. So I just had the pleasure of attending a conference in Boston last month, where I met with my other fellows from across the country and even from abroad. So that was a really great opportunity. I gained a lot from that. But I guess I kind of want to echo what Mary was talking about, mental health and the pandemic, because I feel like that's very important. And I feel like that's from a student perspective, just by my own personal experience and also talking with my peers and other people, members of the student body, that's definitely an issue that needs to be addressed because it's, especially during the pandemic, but we're seeing also after the pandemic, a lot of people are having a hard time adjusting to coming back into like the in-person classrooms. And not only that, during the pandemic, people did their best to adapt to the circumstances, but there were still students, who didn't really maybe have the best access to the internet. So they kind of had to put their education on hold. They may have lost a job. They may have lost a family member. So there's all these different factors that kind of, COVID just kind of turned their world upside down. But at this conference, the main sole purpose of the conference I was at was civic engagement. But what I found was all of the speakers at this conference, these are very successful people, and they kept bringing up the topic of burnout among young people. And that's my experience right now. And also just with other people my age is you have these young, promising, bright young adults who are just kind of at the end of their rope and are just trying to, stay afloat. And they don't necessarily have the resources, as Mary was saying, there's a desperate need for social workers, for mental health professionals. And it's really hard sometimes to get those services that you need, especially if you don't have insurance or stuff like that. So I think mental health is something that I think we're kind of having a reckoning with at this time. And we're having a reckoning with a lot of things, especially in this country during the pandemic, especially with racial justice and stuff like that. But I think people are also taking a look at, mental health. And that's, I'm encouraged that, you know, there's less stigma now. It's becoming more open and it's becoming more part of public discourse. But I think we definitely need to work in terms of helping the most vulnerable people, you know, have access to mental health services. And so, yeah, I guess that's kind of where I'd like to discuss today. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Jordan. And is Dr. Ross back with us?
Okay, so we're gonna try this again. It's
Yes,
about-
you sound perfect. Yeah.
Okay, so let me start talk fast. But I think, and I'll piggyback on Jordan, I think with coming back, the exacerbation of the burnout, because in student development, our role is to make sure that we can get the students engaged with limited resources and to be everything to everybody and to try and think faster and anticipate students' issues and concerns when, as professionals, we are grappling with our own issues, and to try and bring students out of that isolation, because, you know, research tells us over and over again that the academic and social integration is what keeps students going through to reaching their goals. And if we can't pull them out of isolation, because remember, they've had 2 years of getting comfortable with isolation, and it's been okay for them to be isolated, and we're trying to pull them out of it, because we already know that everybody's in their phones like this, and they could be walking in a straight line and looking down like this. How they do it, I don't know. But our role is to try to bring them out. And when you look at students who are marginalized, however it happened with COVID, it just exacerbated the situation. And that's something that, you know, we have mental health ratios that are absolutely, you know, crazy to have to deal with. 500 students to 1, you know, 2 and 3 week waiting times to get an appointment. And those are the kinds of barriers that we have to work to get past. So is a third-party vendor where you can see a counselor online as effective as somebody who can see you in person? Well, we have to figure out how to make that relationship effective when we know that love online, thank you Zoom, but there's something that's missing, something that's still part of the wall is still there when you're trying to support and, for all intents and purposes, save a student and get them on the path. But that's something that we have to grapple with, not only in the community college, but the senior institutions as well. And that's what we work for every day.
Okay, thank you. All right. I haven't seen any questions in the chat yet. Please consider posting a question as you hear something you might want to inquire about. Excuse me. So we'll just put out a broader question here to anyone who wants to start, but how can we overcome some of these barriers that we've talked about? Many of them were revealed during the pandemic, but they were always there, whether it was access to the internet, you know, whether the rural communities or students of lower income, or, you know, they didn't have access to internet, or whether it was access to mental health services, or whether it was climate change being, you know, enhanced at this point. You know, we weren't doing much about it because we were focused on COVID. How do we overcome those barriers that were revealed? And whoever wants to talk, just unmute yourself.
I want to say that COVID put it in our face because we have been able to turn a blind eye. Or we have turned a blind eye for quite some time, particularly with marginalized populations. And COVID absolutely put it in our face. And so we had to scramble, you know, whether it's looking for mental health partners that are people of color, or any other kind of affinity group, trying to partner with internet services, or looking for those people that will provide support for marginalized groups, and bringing them in because this is the reality now, and just being creative or being willing and have the courage to redefine what we've done for 99 years, because at year 100, it's not working. It's not working for everybody equitably. And it's hard to have, it's hard to do because we're coming out of our comfort zone to deal with something that we've been able to turn a blind eye to for so many years and get away with. And so now we have to grapple with it.
I'd kind of like to add to that, because it really is accessing services if you're in a marginalized group is almost impossible right now. When you mentioned 2 to 3 week wait times, that might be at the college, but in the community, it's 2 to 3 months or
Oh my
more.
God.
And so, and insurance often doesn't pay for it. So we don't have parity in the healthcare system. And then I think about the stressors that are being added. So yeah, 2 to 3 weeks is nothing.
Mhm.
When you have a seriously persistently mentally ill person, possibly substance abusing too, you could be talking months. The chemical dependency folks will take them on, but they can't address the mental health issues adequately. And I was thinking about gay talking. So there's all these stressors from the sky is falling, basically. The world is, there are so many things that so many of us are stressed about at a time when we can't do much about it. We can do our small parts. So I guess to me, having parity for insurance, but I know I'm going to say the crazy thing, maybe healthcare for all. Just throw that up. So
Yeah, so I just wanted to, Miss Carol Ross Scott, I really liked how she was honing in on the marginalized group of individuals, and also like a lot of people are being medicated, right, and are supposed to go for counseling, but that long wait is interfering with that. And then the medicine is working, and they forget about the counseling portion of it, right? And then a little while, once more stress comes on, like it just like makes everything worse, but they still don't have a counselor, still can't find a counselor, still aren't able to find somebody that they feel comfortable enough speaking to. It's really hard to find a counselor of color around here. I myself have been searching, and that's what that's what I would be most comfortable with. So I feel like there's got to be like a lot more people that are like me, who are struggling. And I just graduated from BU in May, and that was like really stressful because I transferred in from TC3, and majority of my time was spent online, virtually. So I didn't know anything about campus life. I didn't meet anybody. I was very, very isolated. So a lot of this I feel from a personal standpoint. So I just feel like there needs to be more done in terms of mental health. I don't know if it's like community-based, we need to come together just to help each other out, because like a lot of people are struggling and they don't know how to find the resources that they would like, they desire, or that would help them.
And the other thing that, and Jaleesa, I'm gonna stereotype your cohort group. You all self-medicate with weed, okay? And the persistent, constant use of weed, and now that it's legal, not on college campuses, but we don't chase you down for candy or gummies or anything like that. We don't want you to smoke it, but that self-medication cannot be helping matters. It just doesn't. And I'm not a weed smoker, so it's just not good. And so when we're trying to get to the root cause, and we can't get to you, and particularly for students of color, and we can't get to you, or the match isn't there for you to have the trust to open up, it just makes moving and maturing and developing as you should be as young people much more difficult. And then we wonder why you're not coming to class, or why you haven't signed on to Blackboard, or why you're not turning in your assignments. It's because you're not comfortable. You're not comfortable.
I make like.
I'd like to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Let's have Gay and then Jordan. Don't forget your
Okay.
point, Jordan.
So I know that it's come, it's come to all of our attention, I think, that younger people are feeling a little bit of despair over many things. And I mean, climate change is one of those, but many things. So what I'm thinking is, and this kind of goes back to the keynote about optimism being a good way to help yourself, to train yourself up, to be a little more optimistic. But it's like, okay, what are the actual techniques and processes to do that? And I think one of the things that can be really helpful is to just pick something that you want to work on and take action. I think taking action is something a lot of young people especially want to do. Everybody wants to do it, but I think young people especially, helping them know how to take action. I'm constantly looking for solar installers. If you want to help the climate change problem, help me put up more solar panels. But there's lots and lots of things to do. I think Jordan, he's into the civic engagement. There is nowhere near enough participation in our government, nowhere near, and there's lots and lots of things to do. So you kind of look at your interests, like what kinds of things are you interested in doing? What kinds of skills do you have strengths in? And, don't try to fight all the fights, just pick a few and then work on that. And just know that it takes a lot of work. You got to keep pressing and pressing and pressing. Healthcare for all, or Medicare for all, that is a huge need, a huge cause. I've been working on that a little bit, but very rewarding. We really, really need that. That's our keynote. It's like, why is our longevity less, even though we spend twice as much as every other country? Well, guess what? Our healthcare system sucks. We need to improve it. So many things to work on. So I guess that's my kind of advice for part of the cure for this despair and anxiety that people are feeling. Then the day-to-day, you still have to learn how to manage stress. And just, stress it's all over the place. It's hard to get rid of it, but there are plenty of techniques to manage it. I think that's where it'd be nice to have more therapists available to help people with that. All right.
Thank you, Gay. Okay, Jordan, what did you want to respond to?
Thank you. I think another thing that I've experienced, and I'm also seeing other people discuss now in terms of mental health, is that and I am not a mental health professional. If you're prescribed medication to treat a mental illness, by all means take that. That can be life-saving, and that can be the difference between life and death, literally. But I think too often, a lot of times people see prescribing these drugs as like almost a Band-Aid solution, when the root cause of why people are depressed or why they're feeling this way is the circumstances in their life. Like, they're living in poverty. So instead of just throwing medicine at them, maybe give them resources to, give them access to social mobility, give them resources. And it's just, I know it's a little frustrating because it seems like they just try to, overprescribe these medications, and it very well could be at a chemical level. I have mental health, issues in my family, and it's very much like genetic, and it's just kind of like a chemical imbalance. So in circumstances like that, yes, you may gain a lot from taking these drugs, but I think it's really providing resources and like not going back to burnout. It's like these expectations we have, especially on young people, is just absolutely ridiculous. And like, if you look at the wages, like people who work full time, I'm privileged enough where I can live off of my student loans, and I kind of live at home. So I don't really have a job throughout the semester, but I have friends who have full-time jobs while trying to go to school full-time. And just thinking about like the wages over the past like 30 years have more or less been stagnant, where the cost of living has skyrocketed. Like I know people my age who are like, I'm non-traditional, so I'm in my late 20s, but I know people my age, even as high as 30 who are living at home with their parents. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not, but they may not live in a healthy environment. They may not have the best relationship with their parents, or that's also why, even if you want to talk about domestic violence victims, they kind of feel, especially in the pandemic, they kind of feel trapped because it's like, I don't really have the resources to escape the circumstance. So I think mental health is way more complicated than just like a chemical thing. I think there's a lot of other factors involved, and I think we just need to keep that in mind. And it really goes back to providing resources and services, and that's the issue. It's like, how do we advocate for that, instead of just this expectation where you're just like, you're kind of on your own to fend for yourself in this world. And it's more of like they put the blame on the individual instead of the system. And so that's something I've just noticed, and it's kind of frustrating. And I think we need to talk about that. But, yeah.
I'm noticing that there are students that are struggling in class, and it appears to be more and more and more. And I'm wondering what any of your comments would be, including any of the participants, how we can help them. And I'm talking academically strong students who are just falling by the wayside. They're stressed. They have they tell me they have mental health issues and that they've stopped coming to class, or they don't have the motivation to do their work. And so how can we help them? Because clearly these are barriers too. And I think it's still lingering COVID effect because of, now they're asked to participate in a classroom and in a social setting, and they're asked to interact with other students, and they're struggling. So if anyone wants to comment on, how we can approach that, and then there is a question in the chat, but I was just thinking this kind of fit. But how can we motivate them? And I think optimism is a great approach. But how can we reach our students in a way that helps them return to campus, integrate without the stress and pressures that they're experiencing?
I'll say something about that. I think we need more community. We don't have community in the United States. It used to be there were neighborhoods. People would have a community in their neighborhood. They would maybe have a community in their church. We don't have that. We're all like these individual people that go to our whatever and come home and hide in our hidey hole. So one of the solutions to that is to purposely, consciously help create communities. Now, that's one of the things we talk about it. I belong to the Unitarian Universalist Church. And, as we're talking to our friends, we talk about that as a community that you can join to find a community. That's why I joined it, really. It's not so much religion, it's just more of the community aspect. And I'm thinking maybe on campuses, there are ways to do that. There's clubs, I don't know what all there is these days, but forming intentional communities for people to belong to, that really helps. And people don't feel so isolated. They don't feel so lonely. They have people to talk to. They have people to rely upon. I mean, community is traditionally, a community was a place where if you suddenly needed a babysitter for your kid, you could talk to your neighbor and maybe they would help you out. Well, we don't have that level anymore. We need that though, I think.
Yeah, so to kind of go off what Gabe was just talking about, the whole community setting and everything, one aspect that I've seen with, I've worked with people who were in their 90s and 100s when the COVID started, and then I've worked with children as young as 10 to 12. So I've kind of seen all these stressors and everything of all different ages. And one thing to kind of go off what was just said about the communities is, to help individuals, no matter what age or what background or whatever, find a positive and healthy coping skill that can help them, whether they're feeling anxious or angry or sad or depressed or lonely, finding that core within them of something that they can do that they enjoy doing. So whether that be sports or whether it be going for a walk or, even just finding, maybe games or sports, or or just talking with someone. So finding that core thing that they enjoy doing is a great tool to use as a therapy tool that they can do either in a group setting, or even if maybe they're not yet ready to be part of a group yet, finding something that can be therapeutic on an individual level. So whether that be, again, hiking, or even cooking, or listening to music, or something that they can do that can be, something outside of their norm. Because, as we know, we get into these ruts where, it can be work all day and go home and be with kids. Or if you're a student, go to classes and study for hours and then study some more, or have to work a full-time job. So, the importance of having something that is both therapeutic but also fun that you can do on the side, of whether, again, that be as a group or something you just do by yourself, that you can just decompress and that you can just relax or enjoy, or just have something that can just release that anxiety. So that is something we have to either help people see through, whether it be community, or whether it be through student activities or student organizations, or just help people find that what they can connect to as something that doesn't have to be a job, or doesn't have to be grade oriented like schooling.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Anyone else on our panel want to contribute? And then I can maybe try to address some of the comments. We've got some great comments in the chat.
I just real quick, and I noticed that comment that just came up. Some of just the title of this conference, the divisiveness that we are experiencing right now. And somebody had mentioned, how do we collaborate? I wish I had that answer. I don't know, but I would love to be a part of something. So, and I was hoping from this conference that, addressing that divisiveness, how, we don't have community because we're factioned off into these, extreme, and most of us are really in the middle, but we're afraid to say much about it. So I guess, I like the question. I wish I had an answer. And if anybody had ideas, I would love to hear them.
And so Mary is referring to a question posed by Jeff Smith: what collaborations could be established after the conference to work on these issues? So, and I think that's really an important conversation we could have. And those collaborations could then work to build community, which would then help maybe address some of these feelings of isolation and loneliness, which was referenced by, let me go back down here through the chat, Gail. Mentioned that feeling helpless can be isolating and anxiety provoking. And also she suggests volunteer opportunities and trying to get students out in the community. And certainly that could work too. And we've had, COVID has had a severe impact on this community. And I imagine that's true, that people walk away from the volunteer activities because they're afraid to get COVID, or they don't want to wear the masks in order to volunteer. Or they didn't come back after we reopened. So thoughts about that, thoughts about how we can collaborate and try to build community.
I would just like to start out. So this is, I'm going to do a plug for a group that I'm working with right now. Sorry. It's called Binghamton Food Rescue. It's a great organization, and it's not necessarily a food bank. It's an organization, and we go around basically every Saturday, and we collect, we go to the farmers market on Front Street near BCC, and we go around to other various places. And the whole objective really is to get produce and like perishable food and provide that to, people, who are experiencing food insecurity. So we do that every Saturday. And if anyone wants to volunteer, I will drop my email in the chat. And if you want to learn more about that, we distribute that food every Saturday. I'm trying to pull up, it's at Walnut Street. It's at a community center here in Binghamton, on Binghamton's west side. So I've been doing that recently, and it's a great group of people. And I think the reason why I enjoy this organization is because I've volunteered at other food banks too, but this one is kind of secular. So, and not putting down religion at all. I was raised in the church and everything, but a lot of people maybe feel that a lot of the volunteer opportunities, especially in rural America, are church affiliated, and they may not feel comfortable with that. So this is kind of an opportunity if you want to help out, volunteer and address the issue of food insecurity, which I think is totally ties into COVID too. I'm sure all of those issues were exacerbated by COVID with people losing their jobs and everything. So we're always looking for volunteers. The season's kind of wrapping down because again, we get a lot of our produce from farmers, from local farmers. But we're going to pick right back up in spring. And if you'd like to learn more, I will put my email in and we can chat about that. So.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Bernard Fleming suggests, and it's a strong suggestion, and I personally agree, colleges and universities need to make the recognition of mental health a priority, and all staff need to be on board and recognize that students are struggling and need help. I know moderators are supposed to remain neutral, but I don't feel as though I have to moderate too much with this group. So I'm just going to say that, as a professor, when I notice that students are struggling, I do send them over to our counseling center. And I think that there could be more training across the board in our campus because anyone might notice there's a struggle, right? In financial aid, maybe when a student can't pay or needs more assistance, or at student accounts when they can't pay their bill. I mean, these encounters with our students happen across the campus. So that's a really excellent point that it has to be a campus effort. It can't just be one location. For example, just in the academic advising office, because certainly academic advisors will notice that, and it can't just occur in counseling. We have to make a concerted effort across the campus wherever we integrate or meet the student to notice that something's not quite right and to get them the help they need. But as Carol mentioned, we could use more counselors, that the ratio could be higher to the student, or lower, I guess I should say, and we need more help. And that's why we're looking for other services. And let's see, so Lourdes has some excellent programs too that Rebecca is posting about. That would be great. Okay, so Rebecca's sharing her information that we could access as well for free in the community. So that's really awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. So another question is, and I thought this was a great question, what have you learned in the pandemic experience that you couldn't Google, right? My students always try to Google the answers. Oh, sorry, Kathy has a question. Let me go to Kathy.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for a wonderful, very interesting dialogue. I wanted to share, just because this is a personal experience, I work in higher ed. I'm a colleague of Carla's, and I work in our foundation and alumni area, primarily where we engage with students is more along the lines of the scholarship program administration, application and awarding and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that, I kind of have struggled with is that I'm not a professional mental health counselor, and I have to give a shout out to my husband. He's actually a professor in the Master of Public Administration program over at BU, and he's a very left brain kind of guy. And during COVID, he did teach a lot in person during the time and such. And I watched him when everybody was home and his teaching, where he all of a sudden just instituted a mental health check-in by the professor. And this is totally not anything that he had ever done or considered. And I guess the thing that shocked me most about it was that he came in prepared to lecture, and then he had everybody there were certain students that were meeting in person and some who were hybrid and on the Zoom concurrently with the class, and said, we're going to do a check-in right now. I want you to check in with me, send me a private chat, and just let me know how you're doing, which was pretty foreign for him and also for our students, but it was amazing at the level of detail that certain students, just having the ability to say, I'm okay, because there is this stigma associated with, I'm not okay. None of us have gotten through the pandemic unscathed. I'm convinced I have post-traumatic stress in a situation that I'm sure everybody else does. But I thought it was very courageous, and it helped me to learn a little something about how we might do more. And yes, I think the counseling referrals are really important because, I'm not a professional, he's not a professional, but I wonder if that's something that would be more acceptable, because I did had socialized with some of his colleagues, and someone said, hey, we heard from our students that you are doing this regular mental health check-in. And, what made you decide to do that, and how is it going, and are people sharing? Because I think, but I think it taught me that it's okay to ask people and let them know that they can confidentially and privately do that. I don't know what the answer is at the end of the day, but I agree with Mary Whitaker also that I'd like to be part of what that is, but I'm not the professional in the mental health arena. But, you don't identify students who are in trouble on your campus and something terrible happens, and then everybody feels, what could I've done differently? So it's more of just a comment, but I think it was taking on a new role that you would have never dreamed that you would have been speaking to your students in a certain way before the pandemic. So it was just a comment that I wanted to make, but also throw my hat in that if there's an initiative or a solution, I'd like to be a part of it.
Thank you very much for participating and sharing that. I observe a lot of high school, college courses taught at the high school level, and there's a couple of teachers who do that. They'll do a mental health wellness check, and it's really impressive they do that. And never occurred to me to do that in my own class, but it might be a great idea to start doing that on campus. So going back to other comments, first of all, let's see. So we have to start with empathy. I see a lot of community interaction around local school activities and events. Gay has asked us to take those worries and do something. It's true, right? Get productive and go do something instead of, letting that anxiety consume us. And so she's looking for somebody to help her do social media. And of course, you can do some volunteer work with Jordan. So that's in the chat as well. And he shared his information, as did Gay. So it sounds like we've got some people willing to get together and build community after this conference, which is pretty amazing. And then Stick is also having some trouble finding a social worker. And I know there are social workers participating in this conference to get the word out. If I was qualified, I'd apply, because working with Sue Ruff would be a dream come true. So any of you social workers who are qualified, get out there and apply. Roz, you have a question. Kathy, you don't anymore, right? You want to lower your hand, or do you have another question? Okay. All right. Roz, please share.
Okay, so mine's not a question, mine is a comment. And I was the director of Jewish Family Service for 18 years. I'm retired now. And one of the things I did is I was a facilitator for Social Connections for Senior Women's Group that was run through the Office for Aging and Faith in Action. And we brought women together. They were self-selected actually through Faith in Action, and groups were put together actually just by zip code, so that people from the same neighborhoods would be closer to be able to travel to a central point. And there was no agenda other than to recognize that people felt that they were losing their friends, they were losing their family, and that they needed community, like Gay was talking about, like we've been talking about. And the groups came together, my group in particular, came together without any agenda other than to be there every week for each other. And people were happy to come there. They formed such a tight network that it was successful for 18 years. What happened then, of course, people got, they got older, they got sickly, they were unable to come. I retired, so the group is no longer active, but it was a wonderful role model group for what we could think about for the future at any age, not just for seniors. And we would get together, people would suggest a topic for the next week. Sometimes we would bring pictures of ourselves when we were young, and then people would pass them around and talk about it. There was every kind of possible subject that people wanted to mention to each other. Then it got to be so close that people stopped meeting in the public place and invited people to their homes, which was a whole nother facet of getting to know the individuals, because you got to see the way they live, you got to be the warmth of their home. Sometimes we went out to lunches. So having been a participant in it and being the facilitator, I actually became part of the group. I wasn't just the outsider anymore. And I do think that a group like that does need a strong leader. I don't think that kind of group, as I saw happen in the groups, it doesn't just happen by itself. There has to be somebody who is there for other people to depend on to keep it going. But it was extremely successful. And I would be really happy for being able to work with some group here in this community to do something like that again.
Thank you. What a neat model. Yeah, we're taking notes. So thank you. I appreciate that. And we'll
Thank
get your name down too. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate everyone's enthusiasm for wanting to help out and participate. We only have a couple minutes. It's just flown by, at least it has for me. Does anyone want to have any concluding thoughts or parting wisdom that you want to share before we have to return to the main group?
I'd like to say, particularly looking from a DEI lens, COVID was the eye opener, particularly for us in higher education, and how we provided services to support student learning and development. It showed us really our shortcomings, particularly when we tried to identify the resources to support students of color. And I think that we have a lot of homework to do and work to do, particularly in this area, because you can have an ally, which is great. But when we have students who are looking for somebody that looks like them or understands their story, can relate to their story, and they can't find it, then the lack of a better word, burden, rests with those of us who are responsible for trying to get students through to be able to address this. And it's a lot. It really is a lot, and it's not going to happen. We can't provide the answer overnight. It's a journey that we all have to be on, and we all have to be willing and have the courage to have the discussion and to work to put a plan in place to support all the students. But we know that the impact of COVID on marginalized communities is just greater. That is just the reality.
Yes, absolutely. And with that, I want to thank all of the panelists for your time and attention and expertise. And I want to thank the participants as well for your engaging conversation and enthusiastic chat. And we'll be saving this, and it has been recorded. So hopefully we can work together and build some community after the conference. So thank you so much, and we'll see you back in the main room. The link is in the chat for you to return to the main room. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of the conference.